I've kind of determined like what the sort of well-being essentials are in my life. And when I don't hit those, like everything else just kind of falls out of place.
Because sometimes things do need to be said that maybe are going to turn someone off a little bit or make them not so happy. So I've had to be really good at learning constructive criticism.
To me, well-being, there's a lot of solutions to well-being, but if you don't know the cause of your poor well-being, then you're never going to be able to start applying solutions.
If you're in general practice or ER or, internal medicine, places where things happen frequently, then you could end up in a little bit of a pickle if you don't have something intentional to sort of lean on.
I think well-being is just a must in veterinary medicine. Like, it's inevitable that you're going to encounter those kind of situations. So.
Okay, well, welcome back to another episode of Exploratory, where we aim to explore all things related to veterinary well-being. And we are excited to have a very special guest with us on today's episode. Her name is Linzey Leinart, and she is a very sharp veterinary student at UC Davis College of Veterinary Medicine. She's in the class of 2021. And Linzey first learned of Get Motivated when I flew out to UC Davis to give a well-being related talk. And she is now one of our student representatives this summer. We'll talk more about that a little bit later in the episode. But for now, how are you, Linzey?
I'm pretty well. How are you?
Thank you very much. I am doing fine. I'm really excited about today's episode. And just thanks again for all that you're doing for Get Motivated and for the state of well-being of the profession. And definitely thanks for doing a podcast recording with us today. And I'm excited to dig a little bit deeper into who you are and what drives you and things like that. So with that being said, Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you're from originally and what your interests are in terms of veterinary medicine, all that good stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Basically, I'm student going into third year at Davis, and I'm originally from Arizona. Grew up in Gilbert, Arizona, and I'm actually a witchy student, so it's kind of like a program, a sort of scholarship program where they'll pay the difference between in-state and out-of-state tuition as long as you come back to Arizona to practice. So I'll be heading back to the desert after I graduate. But yeah, when I kind of started thinking about doing veterinary medicine, I was really interested in science, and I just love science in general. I started off in business, actually, but I learned that I hated it after I took like an accounting class and an intro to business class. So I got into the science realm, and then I just kind of just had this motto in my head ever since I considered veterinary medicine, and it was treat the pets, serve the people. And so the reason I basically went into vet med is because I really felt like I connected to people through their animals. A lot of the times, like when people go into vet school, they say, well, I like animals more than I like people, and that's why I didn't do human medicine. And if you ever do applications, like they don't like that answer. But anyway, I actually got into veterinary medicine because of people. Yeah, I got into vet med for the people. And so because of that, like I could never go into like research or like food animal because like there's just not enough owners involved for me. I really find the most satisfaction when there's a lot of like client communication and interaction, things like that. So yeah, I've just been learning so much along the way. And it was interesting because when I first started vet school, I put all of my focus on serving the people, as in serving the clients. But now I've kind of gone into this season of leadership. And so I'm learning how to serve my team so that they can serve my clients. And it's just been like really exciting on my end because I've just been learning so much. And it's something I'm actually really passionate about. So.
Wow. Honestly, I know that we have had many conversations before. I did not know that about you, that you were so
Oh, yeah.
client communication driven and that you really wanted to do vet med for the people. And, I've
Mhm.
been realizing that so much lately that I am being drawn towards people who are very similar to myself. Because when I went into veterinary medicine, Lindsay, you won't believe this. I thought the exact same thing, that I wanted to do veterinary
Mhm.
medicine for the people. And that's actually why I liked the USDA a lot, because I wanted to help people through helping animals. And I just loved everything
Mhm.
about just being able to network and speak to people and to really provide service for the people. But I also have that animal component as well. And I'm pretty sure that on
Mhm.
my personal statement that I wrote that I wanted to help people through helping their animals. So that is so funny. I did not know that, but I think that's really
Yeah.
important and
Cool.
really cool. And I think that puts you in a really unique position as well, because most veterinary students, as you kind of alluded to, most veterinary students are in veterinary medicine for the animals. So
Mhm.
I think that is super awesome when we find people who really can enjoy the human aspect of it as well. Awesome, awesome,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, what's been your favorite part of veterinary school so far?
I mean, there's so many good things. I mean, to be honest, just learning in general, like learning medicine is it's just so exciting for me. Like being an undergrad, you just had a bunch of like general chemistry, biology, blah, blah. I was so bored during those classes. And so, like, getting to actually learn about like the root of like what I want to do in life, and then also being able to apply what I've learned. Like for instance, I had a 2-week externship at a clinic in Tucson, Arizona, and it was just so refreshing to like come into that externship and be like, wow, like I learned so much in these past 2 years. Like this is so cool. I get to apply to everything I've learned. And so like, if everything about all the students, all the extracurriculars were taken away from vet school, like I would still go because the learning experience is just, top notch. I just love it.
Wow, that's really interesting as well. And are you a very hands-on type of student? Do you like the labs, and like do you think you're gonna like surgery and things like that, or do you prefer like medicine type cases, skin cases, things like that?
Yeah, I would say I don't know. I never really, I was never really super into labs, so I don't know if I'm like super hands on, but I'm definitely like clinically oriented. So, like, whenever we would be
Okay.
learning about a certain type of disease or whatever it was, like, I would always like ask myself, like, okay, so how would this scenario go, like, if this animal walked into the room, like the exam room, And then for me, it's a lot easier to think about everything just in a clinical setting. As far as kind of just like types of medicine, I did shadow a lot on the urgent care sector, and I really like that just because it keeps you on your toes and everything is interesting. But I really like general practice as well because you get to make like really great relationships with people and just really get to know them. So I'm torn. I haven't decided yet.
Yeah, well, the good news is you've got plenty of time to sort of figure these things out, and there's always time to change down the road. And that's one of the coolest parts about the veterinary profession to me, is that there are just so many options. If you want to specialize, and
Yeah.
if you want to do a lot of surgery, you can go to a spay neuter clinic and get tons and tons and tons of surgery opportunities and things like that. And as we alluded to earlier, there's USDA, there's industry. You can be a sales rep for Hills.
Mhm.
There are just so many
Yeah.
options. So I'm glad that you kind of already have a small idea of what you want to do. But like you say, you have plenty of time to do that. Are you excited about clinics coming up in fourth year?
Yes, no. I think it's gonna be definitely tough, like mentally and emotionally. Like I'm definitely gonna have to get stronger in that aspect. But I am really excited just to start. Like I said, just kind of applying everything that I've learned. I think it'll be a really kind of just cool year in school. You know, it'll be different, and so regardless, I think it'll be okay.
Yeah, you're probably in a better situation than I am. I was a mostly food animal focused student when I was in veterinary school, but you know how veterinary school is, where it's small animal heavy, regardless of what your focus area is or what your
Yeah.
interest area is. So when it came time for me to do internal medicine and ER and soft tissue surgery, it was like torture for me. But I did make it through. Clearly,
Oh,
I am Dr. Holly now, so I survived. I did survive that.
yeah.
Now, okay, so what's been your biggest challenge of veterinary school thus far?
I think my biggest challenge, honestly, has been not making veterinary school be my identity. Because, like, it's just not something that's like solid that you can really build. I'm trying to think of a better word, but it's not something you can really just gain your identity out of, because if you get a low grade, then that determines your entire future. It determines your own personal kind of values at that time. Like it's just very fluctuating depending on how you perform in school. So I just didn't want veterinary school and being a
Mm,
veterinary student to identify who I was. So, I mean, it's also like, what if I dropped out, or what if something happened and I was no longer a vet student? Like, what did that mean for who I was? So, I think that was the hardest thing, is kind of finding my identity outside of vet school, even though it took up a huge chunk of my life. And so I was able to do that through kind of just knowing the things that I wanted to grow myself in, um, which I think is, it was a bunch of things, but yeah, just not making vet school my identity.
wow, that's actually a really deep answer, and you've got me over here, like my mind is almost boggled because I've never thought of that before. I believe that a lot of students make veterinary school their identity, and then they make the veterinary
Yeah,
profession and their title as veterinarian their complete identity. And we'll talk about it in a little bit,
yeah,
but I think that is leading to a lot of the well-being issues that we have as well, because the veterinary
yeah,
profession is tough. So if that's all you've got, there are going to be a lot of obstacles and challenges if you don't have anything outside
yeah,
of that. And if you don't have that
exactly.
tough mental attitude to go along with that. So now, did you come into veterinary school with sort of that mindset and that ideal? Or is that something that you developed once you got there? Like, okay, this is this is intense. Let me not let it consume me.
I don't really know. So definitely in undergrad, I did a ton of things in addition to school, like extracurriculars. Like I was on intramural volleyball, like I would go to church, like volunteering at church, like I had two jobs, like in a research center. Like so I was doing a lot. So I think from the get-go, like my identity never has been just school. So it could have kind of rooted from that. But also, I think once I started vet school, I started realizing that a lot of people just did vet school and that was it. And like, I mean, honestly, like if you want to go specialize or do things after school, like that's a good idea. Like it's important to give all of your effort into, you know, being the best vet you can be and getting the good grades, because if that's what you want to do after, then like, that's a good idea. But for me, I don't really have any plans on specializing. So it was more important for me to stay sane rather than try and focus on, getting the good grades. Cause I also just don't think that's really me. Like, whenever I'm studying, I study what I want to get out of it. I don't really study like the details and stuff, so maybe I'm not the best example for everyone. But that was just kind of, I don't know, just something I kind of learned along the way. So
Well, hopefully you're like the new age vet student because I believe that's how
yeah,
I believe that's how it should be. And you know that the
yeah,
other way, the alternative, I believe, is the old school way of doing things where you go in and you make it your life. And if you
uh-huh.
don't make it your life, then you're ridiculed for that almost. It's like you don't get your street creds, and you didn't suffer through veterinary school. You haven't suffered through practice, so you don't really get your street credits and things like that.
Yeah,
But I really like that mindset and mentality, and I really hope that as the years roll on, that people start to sort of adopt that a little bit more, this more well-rounded approach. And it sounds like you've always been well-rounded from the stuff, the extracurriculars you were doing at church and things like that. So that's really awesome. I think that there's going to be some vet student somewhere or some pre-veterinary student that hears that's really thankful for that. So I know I would
yeah.
have been. Okay. And so, can you share why well-being means so much to you? So, tell us a little bit of your story. And I know that you had told me earlier that you haven't really had a
Mhm.
major like adversity or anything like that. But tell us why well-being means so much to you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know how to make it super complex. It's kind of simple to me. Like, I just feel like my life is so much more full and it's like worth living when I really just take care of myself. Like, I don't know, it just comes down to that for me. Like, I can tell when I'm not taking care of myself, like, everything else just goes out the window. Studying, like, my relationships, like, social, whatever. So, like, I've kind of determined, like, what the sort of well being essentials are in my life. And when I don't hit those, like, everything else just kind of falls out of place. And so, I mean, the reason why just well-being is so important to me is I just see how it affects every area of my life, and so I make sure to keep it a priority. And I mean, I don't know for sure, but I mean, that may be a reason why I haven't faced some adversity. I mean, like, luckily I've been blessed to not have any crazy things happen, with health and or my family or whatever like that. But I think some of it can kind of be looked at like preventative medicine. Like, I've just kind of always had that mentality in my life. So I like to think that some of it's contributed from that. But yeah.
I really love that about your story because oftentimes I believe that there's this kind of stigma with well-being that if you want to practice or if you want to focus on your well-being, that makes you someone who's mentally unstable or someone who needs help or something like that. And I really love what you said about almost like preventative medicine. And I believe that you have what I call true well being. I don't know if I had that definition in the presentation at UC Davis. I've been putting it in a lot of the presentations that I do recently, or in the recent past. But true well being is something that's deliberate and it's intentional. And you very clearly said that you realized the benefit of practicing well-being, and we'll talk about what you do for your personal well-being in a few minutes. But you realize that your relationships, your own personal, just how you feel starts to fall by the wayside when you neglect your well-being, and therefore you choose to not neglect your well-being, at least not intentionally, and things like that. So I think that's really awesome. Now, do you believe that Do you believe so? I have the definitions of pseudo well-being versus true well-being. And pseudo well-being is something that I believe
Yeah.
is kind of like just coincidental because nothing bad's happened, but you haven't really focused in on your well-being. You're not doing anything. You don't know what things to do if something were to go wrong. Do you believe that an individual can live like a life of true well-being without doing something deliberately? Like, can you just coincidentally end up in a life of personal and professional well-being, in your opinion?
Um, I mean, coincidentally, yeah. I mean, there's it just sounds like the pseudo well-being is more of like a circumstance dependent type of well-being. So, as long as nothing comes up, you have well-being, right? And I think the true well-being is not dependent of circumstance, situation, things that get thrown at you, just because you've kind of established your own personal form of well-being and something that's, establish it in a way where circumstance isn't going to affect you. Um, I think that's also something that you have to come to terms with for yourself personally. It's not going to be the same for everyone. It's not going to look the same for everyone. Um, and so, yeah, I think that's kind of what I interpreted as the difference between those two types of well-being.
That's really awesome because when you said that, it made me think about when you said that, yeah, if nothing bad ever happens or things just go smoothly forever, then yeah, you can kind of coincidentally make it through. But in the veterinary profession,
Mhm.
if you're in general practice or ER or internal medicine, places where things happen frequently, then you could end up in a little bit of a
Yeah.
pickle if you don't have something intentional to sort of
Oh,
lean on. And so I think that's a really good sort of depiction to make that, yeah, of course it's possible to make it all the way through. But in veterinary medicine, is that likely? Is that realistic? And what are the odds that someone can really make it through without the euthanasias, without the clients who can't pay, and then
yeah.
things like that. So it's always a really interesting conversation. I love to ask people that question and that concept above true well-being, true
Yeah,
well-being.
I was yeah, when I was shadowing at the clinic in Tucson, we were on urgent care, and I think there were like at least four euthanasias that day, and all of them were kind of like out of the like emergency euthanasias, like they just, you know, came back from cardiac arrest or whatever it
Wow.
was. And I think for the first time, I was like, this is what compassion fatigue looks like. Like
Mm.
I was definitely starting to see how it affected, I mean, first and foremost, the doctor who was attending to the case, and then also the team. I mean, I didn't even do anything, and I was feeling it. Like, and so, I mean, just that alone, like, I think well-being is just a must in veterinary nursing. Like, it's inevitable that you're gonna encounter those kind of situations. So,
Okay, and that's actually a really good segue because my next question is, what are some tools or strategies that you use to maintain your well-being? And so with that situation with the euthanasias, what were your strategies for you know making sure that compassion fatigue didn't really set in for you? What did you do when you got home? What did you do in the moment? Things like that.
so for me, like, there are kind of like three, like, quote unquote, essentials in my life that I've determined that if they're lacking in my day to day life, then everything else is going to go south. So I make sure they're like a priority in my week. And this is kind of more so in just my vet school life. When it comes to clinics and stuff, I don't know if I've really gotten there yet, like what my essentials will be during clinics. I haven't gotten there yet. But just within the past couple of years that I've been in school, for me, making my faith and my church pretty much number one priority was really important for me. Like, I go to a church that's like a solid 30 minutes away from Davis, 2 to 3 times a week. And so a lot of people thought it was crazy. But like if I missed doing those things throughout the week, it was so evident in my life. Like I just felt just really like run down because the community that I'm with when I'm at church is so uplifting and so encouraging. So like, and it was so nice to be with a community that wasn't in medicine. And it just helped me to like view the bigger picture of life, you know, and not get held up in the grades and, you know, the schooling and the lectures and labs and stuff like that. So that was a really big priority for me. The second essential for me was just going to the gym. I am
Okay.
like a gym junkie,
Yeah.
so I go. I usually go like 6 days a week, but whenever I don't go, I'm like, dang it, like you know, I wish I was there, and it's just really my
Mm.
time to just kind of release everything, really, honestly, just getting my blood flowing and like to the brain and like everywhere, like it helps so much. Like I study so much better after I've gone and exercised for a while. And so I know that when I have to cut out my gym time, I'm like, okay, this is a really intense week because gym is like number two, you know? Um, so yeah. And then the third one, like, probably for most students, was my dog. Like, I just needed to make sure that, you know, if I wasn't taking care of my dog, like, he'd just be on my mind all the time and I would be distracted. Like, oh, like, man, I didn't walk him today. Like, he's going to hate me. Or, not necessarily like that. But just making sure that, you know, he was taken care of. And that way I was happy and I was less distracted on all of my other activities. So those three things, like, I just made sure they were just kind of fulfilled in my life. And when they were, like, life was good, you know? School was great. My relationships were great. And, you know, it was easier to go about just being a student after those things were just addressed in my life.
Wow. So that sounds like the full trifecta of personal development being, sort of mind, body, spirit. And I really love I guess the theme for you is stay well rounded, almost is what it sounds like. Have a community that's outside of the veterinary
Yeah.
profession. Have some physical fitness. You can't just be a gym rat with six pack abs that never studies and never does anything else too, especially if you're going to be in vet med. But
Yeah.
make that a priority. And it sounds like you have, and you can confirm this for me, but it sounds like you have amazing self discipline to be able to get to the gym and to do it, five, 6 times a week, and then to feel almost a little bit guilty or almost a little bit out of place when you don't make it to the gym, just because you love that so much, and
Yeah.
it feels like it's a part of you, and even the dedication to your dog and wanting to make sure that you get your dog your walks and things like that. And I know that a big thing for some veterinary professionals, and it's almost like a conundrum, if you will, like an oxymoron, where the pets of veterinary professionals can sometimes get neglected, not like to the extent of the collars embedded into the neck, but if you're at the clinic, if you're at the clinic from
Mhm.
8 to 8, you come home and you're exhausted because you have to be back at the clinic
Yeah.
again at 8. Where are you finding the time to
Mhm.
fit in your dog and your kids if you got kids and your spouse if you got a
Yeah.
spouse and then yourself on top of all of that? And it sounds like you already have,
Yeah, I know.
right? And it sounds like you already have just a good, like, it means something to you to have the multiple areas of your life taken care of. And I believe that when an individual makes something a priority,
Mhm.
when they're committed to something, they are going to get that more often than not.
Yeah, super true.
Awesome. And so, in terms of the working out and things like that, because some people, maybe they've never worked out before in their lives, and maybe for other people, they have worked out since they were a kid. They did sports and things like that. I imagine the journey would be a little bit different. Have you always been a person who
Mhm.
works out, or did you develop that in undergrad or something like that?
Yeah, up until my freshman year in undergrad, like I avoided the gym. I did not like the gym. Like, I don't know, I just hated exercising in general. And then how I kind of got into it is there was two of my friends on the same floor as me in the dorm, and they would always go. So I went with them for a couple times, and then New Year's came around, and I kind of made a resolution, probably the only one that ever stuck. But I was just like, I'm just going to keep doing this. And honestly, too, like once you start seeing results, like it's addicting. And so
Yeah.
there's been a lot of times where, like, yeah. And I mean, a lot of the times people won't, have always asked to go with me, and I'm more than welcome to like bring them with me and show me what I do and stuff like that. But I think just in terms of um, you know me, who's someone who just goes all the time because I just absolutely love it, versus someone who's just starting and may need some more motivation, like I just always ask them, like, how bad do you want it? Like, you got to start somewhere. You might as well just start going. And even if you don't really know what you're doing, just going there is a big step in and of itself. And you don't have to go 6 days a week like me. Like I'm a little on the crazy side, but just starting with something that you can achieve. Like I'm very much about setting yourself up for success. Like if you can't do like a 2-hour gym session 4 times a week, then don't do that. Like just, like, and if you need someone else, like find a partner that is really, who goes all the time. Don't try and set something up with someone who's never gone in their life, because that's also setting yourself up for failure. So, like, I don't know, that's just my approach to if you ever like want to start going to the gym, or just physical health in general.
You know what? I love that advice, and you're exactly right. If you want results, it's going to be at least a little bit difficult in order for you, especially if you've
Yeah.
been, sitting on the couch, eating fast food and doing a lot of different things like that. If it's not a part of who you are already, it's going to be some level of complex. And I think that you really just have to be committed to you. You have to be committed to what it is that you want to achieve. And one thing that I wrote a book, The 7 Principles to a Guaranteed Body Transformation, 12 months or less. But I put in there that you have to have an amazing purpose and an amazing
Awesome.
why, or else it's going to be really hard.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And for you, it sounds like your why is because
Yeah.
I really enjoy it. I like the
Right.
results. You have multiple whys, and so that's probably why it's working out for you so
Yeah.
well.
Right. Right. Yeah. I know, like for my mom, it's even just um she wants to be like kind of for lack of a better word, like mobile for her grandkids, like she wants to be able to go on hikes with them or walks with them or go to the park. So like that's her motivation. So it can look very different for every person. It doesn't have to just be for I want to get buff. So um just kind of finding out like what like you said, what's your why.
That's an amazing why. And my mom plays tennis a lot. What type of exercises does your mom do? Is she gym goer as well, or is she like cardio? Does she play a sport?
She she's done a couple half marathons in her life, so she really likes running.
Wow.
She's a
Okay.
runner.
Okay. And what about you? What's your favorite type
Mhm.
of exercise or?
Um, I'm definitely not a runner. Cardio is like not my thing. Cardi, no. I really like just weightlifting. I think it's just kind of it's fun for me, and I have kind of a so I have like a smaller body type. So I've learned that's kind of easier for me to get toned
Okay.
because I just don't have that much fat. So yeah, so I think it's always been
Okay,
weightlifting.
very awesome. And tell us a little bit about At Vets Got Sweat. Tell us a little bit about that.
So that was kind of like a group that I created starting vet school, just because, when you start vet school, you have all these kind of like icebreakers and you meet new people. And almost everyone that I talked to was like, yeah, I want to make sure I go to the gym during school. Like that, like physical health was definitely something everyone wanted to do, but they knew it was kind of going to be difficult. And so the solution that I tried to make for that was having a community that would keep each other accountable. Because I think ultimately that was going to be the most difficult part, was accountability being in vet school. And so, like, basically, how I set it up was that we would all kind of warm up together, like jog on the track, and then we would pair up and then do just some, you know, workouts that way. Whether you could do whatever you and your partner decided. So if it was cardio, you could do that, or if you wanted to do weightlifting. But that way, you could also learn from one another by being with a different partner every other week. And that was something that I personally like. I love learning what other people do and what other people's routines are, because sometimes I get bored with my own. So that was something I wanted to implement. It worked out, and I think a lot of people were a little bit intimidated by the idea. And so it started off really well, and then it kind of came to a halt. But, it was something that I really learned about, and like learned in just sectors of like marketing and community, and kind of just starting like just a group and a school activity. So, yeah, it was a great experience.
I love the self starter in you. And that was such a huge issue for me when I was in vet school, because it was hard for me to balance that. I actually had like 40 tennis clients while I was in veterinary school. I was running the tennis lessons business, basically. I played tennis in undergrad, things like that. But in terms of my own fitness, I sometimes felt that I was being neglectful if I worked out instead of studying. And so that became increasingly like just a challenge for me. And I think that the results really showed, because I picked up about 20 pounds through that process. So I love the whole
Mm.
idea of that, and starting your own thing, and really trying to create a community to solve a problem. And it is a problem. I think that most people would probably agree with that. It's so interesting because I think that a lot of the wellness initiatives that I see at schools and at veterinary schools are based around sort of fitness, and usually just fitness. And that's one thing that I always try to kind of jokingly mention to when I'm speaking to an audience, that there's more to well-being than just fitness, though fitness is a really big and
Oh,
important
yeah.
part of well-being, and just sort of having that well-rounded nature there. So that's really awesome. So you've already mentioned about well-being sort of in the workplace. You kind of touched on it a little bit, about how you can have a string of difficult cases, or maybe a string of euthanasias or something like that. Now, how important is it to you for there to be a good culture of well-being at your future place of work as a veterinarian?
Oh man, it absolutely important. And like I said earlier, like I've really just kind of within this past semester, I've been just digging so much into leadership and teams and business. And I read this book. It's called Strength Based Leadership, and the author was the person who helped generate the Strength Finders assessment. If you happen to know about that, super great assessment and survey. But in the book, they talked about um, what strong teams have in common. And this was based on their survey that they had generated. And one of them was members of strong teams are as committed to their personal lives as they are to their work. And talking about just to encourage your team members to put their family and their health first. And so I understand like how well-being plays into just, your career and your engagement at work. And so, granted, I'm not in my, I'm not in the clinics yet, right? I'm not graduated, I'm not a doctor yet. So I don't know how this is going to look in the future, but I do know how big of a priority it is, in the sense that, like, if your team or if you are not addressing like your own well-being, like, you're not going to be able to help your patients, you're not going to be able to help your clients. And that's the ultimate purpose, the reason that you're there. That's your whole vision, right, of the clinic. So without just taking care of yourself, you ultimately can't satisfy the vision of the entire team. So I've already kind of just, decided that when I am a vet and I will have my own team of technicians or receptionists or assistants or whatever it is, like, just making sure that their wellness is put first, and as a priority, just for my own team.
I think that's a really good point because you can't really control the organizational culture of the organization that you go into. So maybe you don't own a hospital right away, but what I'm kind of hearing from you is
Yeah.
that once you get out there, or you can at least try to help your team members as best you can. So you can almost bring the well-being with you. And I always believe that well-being
Yeah.
radiates out from the individual who is manifesting well-being for themselves, who is prioritizing well-being. So if Linzey is all about well-being and fitness and wellness and all that good stuff and has a strong mind, then you can help, your
Mm-hmm.
technician, you can help your receptionist, you can help some of the other people who work with you. I think that it's you know, I believe
Yeah.
that so many people understand exactly what you said of the benefit, like the business benefit and all of the different sort of pros for having a good
Mm-hmm.
culture of well-being. But I'm not sure that many organizations
Mm-hmm.
have really figured that out. And that's one thing, with Get Motivated, we're really trying to
Yeah.
figure out, like, what's a good way to get people to buy into it? What's a good way to have a good tool and a good strategy? I'm excited that I get to spend the rest of my life trying to strategically and creatively come up with a solution to that, especially for the veterinary profession. So that really excites me. But at least you are going to be taken care of wherever you go, whether that hospital has a culture or not. So we understand that it's important, but the things that we can do for ourselves is to at least make sure that we are taken care of.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely going to have to take a look at the Strength Based Leadership book. And did you say it was the Strength Finders Assessment?
Yep. Yep. The authors are the one that made that assessment. It's super cool. You might have heard of it, but basically, you take a survey similar to the
Okay.
Myers-Briggs, but it tells you about your 5 strongest strengths. And honestly, after knowing that, like, my life like borderline changed. I was like, wow, this is how I can, use these to my advantage. So it's really cool.
Would you mind sharing one of your strengths or one of your insights from that?
Oh, absolutely. My number one strength, which I never realized until I saw, but I completely agree with, is harmony. And it has to do with relationships. So basically, I just like it when people get along. And sometimes, like, you could also maybe classify it as a people pleaser. That's definitely a strength and a weakness of mine. But I think it's a really good characteristic to have too, though, in a team, because I celebrate when people get along, and I'll put a lot of effort into making sure that, people click and we can really get things out of each other and really learn from each other. Um, and so, it can also be a weakness too, though, because sometimes I'll say what I need to say just so people are happy. So I've learned how it can work for me and work against me. So that one was really interesting to learn about myself. I also have consistency, analytical discipline, which, like you were saying, so that's not a surprise. And then I'm also very competitive. um, and I actually, yeah, I mean, classic vet student. But I actually just gave a talk about this at my church, and I talked about, competitive, being competitive can be kind of like a good motivator within a team, just kind of striving for the best results. But for me in vet school, I would start competing with my classmates, and it really just started eating into my relationships with them and my friendships. And it would just stir up anger, it would stir up frustration in me when I wasn't, number one, or wasn't, beating so and so, like getting the diagnosis. And so I
Mm.
really just had to learn how to really like look at people differently and not look at them in the sense of how I can beat them. And, that's honestly just seeing myself first before them. But I just had to see like the best in them and just really just see them differently. And to be honest, just see them with God's eyes. And just with a lot more love. But that was something that I learned from recently about kind of a strength of mine, but then how it can also hinder me in certain ways.
Wow, very cool. I bet you if I took that we would have similar results. I'm highly competitive, or
You think so?
I used to be at least. I used to be at least. Now I'm starting to lean more
Okay.
into creation versus competition. So we don't have to compete with each other
Okay.
because we can all
Okay.
create. And there is
Yeah.
more than enough to go around in terms of just like resources and things like that. So you don't really have to compete for those. But I still have a competitive bone in my body. Like I still kind of want to beat other people
Yeah.
out a little bit, you know? And I don't think that will ever go away. That's just who I am. And then also, but people pleaser, I felt like I was you speaking just now when you said that, because I love
Yeah.
harmonious conditions and interactions. Like I don't have enemies and I don't like
Uh-huh.
conflict. I I will
Yeah.
sacrifice some things to avoid
Right.
conflict.
Right.
And you're probably the same exact way. Like,
Yep.
I think that's
Absolutely.
really interesting that you say that, because that is definitely um, me as well. And you're exactly right. It can be a weakness as well, because sometimes things do need to be said that
Hmm.
maybe are going to turn someone off a little bit, or make them not so happy. So I've had
Hmm.
to be really good at learning constructive criticism, and um, just
Hmm.
being willing to not only give constructive criticism, but to accept constructive criticism, because I do like harmonious conditions.
Hmm.
And sometimes I, I've noticed, Lindsay, that it I don't know. I feel like there's a part of me who avoids conflict because I don't like the way that it feels when things are bad,
Yeah.
or when I get a like a bad review or something like that. And I've been there, and it's been really eye opening for
Hmm.
me to be able to put myself out there through like Get Motivated, and to get on stage in front of hundreds of people, and sometimes even
Yeah.
more than that, and to do a lot of the social media stuff, because it really helps me
Right.
to come out of that shell,
Right.
and just be a little bit more
Right.
gutsy. Yeah.
So true. Yeah. I never thought about that. That's a good point.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, we're just about done with this. I know I've had so much fun just listening to you share your wisdom with everyone. Um, I guess sort of to wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to share with our listening audience, which is growing again every single day, and we're excited about that. But is there anything you want to share, like a word of encouragement to give them a hope? Because we know that there's things going on in the veterinary profession in terms of like suicide and burnout, things like that. It's still out there. But is there anything you want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, something that I've really been just attentive to and learning about is just the art of mindfulness, and just being aware of how things affect you, what they are, who they are, how it makes you feel. Because, to me, well-being, there's a lot of solutions to well-being, but if you don't know the cause of your poor well-being, then you're never going to be able to start applying solutions. So for me, like, just identifying almost the cause of everything in my life, not even just well-being, but for me, just kind of identifying everything and just anyone in my life that makes me feel certain types of ways, and just being able to really come to terms with my thoughts and my emotions, and how I can control them and change them or anything like that.
I think that's a beautiful way to bring this podcast to an end, because you just simplified well-being. We have a talk called Wellbeing Simplified, and you really just simplified it. Knowing, having clarity around what it is that you want out of life, what things, sort of make you tick, what things make you sick, and just really paying attention to yourself. Because if you know that A, B, and C irritate the mess out of you, or that A, B, and C make you feel really, really poorly, and that D, E, and F give you well-being, well, we can focus on D, E, and F and eliminate the things in our lives that bring us closer to A, B, and C. And it's a very scientific formula at that point of, okay, get rid of the things you don't want and do more of the things that bring you the manifestation of well-being. And I know sometimes that's easier said than done, but it's really, that is the formula, just like you said. And so, and of course, mindfulness, that's a big part of our mission with Get Motivated, is to increase the awareness of the importance of mindfulness and personal development. So like Lindsey said,
Absolutely.
once we realize these things through mindfulness, through paying attention to ourselves, through being mindful, self-awareness, we can then, through personal development, go and make the alterations that we need. And personal development also allows you to maintain those the things that you sort of figured out for yourself. So I think that was beautifully said, and hopefully, many of our listeners will start to adopt that mindfulness practice. I really believe it's something that should be universal. I know there's not a one-size-fits-all approach to these things, but I believe that mindfulness is one of those universal things, and it's free. So there's really no excuse, but
Right.
Awesome. Well, Lindsey, this has been a ton of fun. I've really enjoyed just listening to your wisdom. I have a lot of things written down here that I'm going to adopt. That's one of my favorite parts about interviewing people and doing these podcasts, so that I get new ideas as well for myself, and I usually learn something about myself. And I'm sure that many of our listeners feel the exact same way. Hopefully we're taking notes and things like that. But thank you again so much for just being who you are and bringing what you bring to the table. And hopefully, people will look at your story and realize that you don't have to be that sort of status quo, traditional student who just cuts off their entire life and to do veterinary medicine, because you can do both. And I believe that you are living invisible and tangible and audible proof that you can have your cake and eat it too, at least as it relates to vet med. So thank you for that.
No problem.
This concludes our episode of Exploratory, and we look forward to being with you on the next one. Take care and be blessed.